The massive taxpayer fraud in Minnesota. All right, so President Trump is blaming the Somali community out there. Close to 90,000 Somalis live in Minnesota, most in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And the reason they live there is because that was a magnet in the beginning when the first Somalis came over. And that's what always happens. Ethnic groups go to where their predecessors are. So the Irish went to Boston and New York. The Italians went to New York. That is the pattern of migration. Mexicans go to California. All right, so Somalis headed on in. Now, the President of the United States, and I talked to him about this directly a few days ago, does not think in general the Somali community really helps this country. Okay, and he's pretty blunt on it. And part of that is their congressperson, Omar, who is a far left, progressive, put any other adjective you want in there, but Trump despises her. And now, with this massive fraud, he is down on the Somali community. So what happened? Okay, so under the Biden administration, trillions of dollars flowed into communities all over the United States during the COVID years. They were unregulated. The money was not watched by feds or state. That's on Biden's watch. Remember, Joe Biden, the 4 years he was in, highest spending president by far in U.S. history, ran up the debt in an astronomical way. So the money pours in to Minnesota, all right? And then three big schemes emerge, all right? Fraud, absolute fraud. Now, if you want to learn about that, you can go and do the Nexus search or the Wikipedia or whatever, Feeding Our Future. I mean, they all got names. But it would be too much for me to explain all this fraud. But they were diverting money. The criminals were diverting money that was supposed to be used to help people into their own pockets in three major ways. Total money, $1 billion. Whoa, 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 whoa. $1 billion. All right, so there have been 87 people charged with crimes, 61 already convicted. These are federal charges. 79 of the 87 Somalis, according to the Hill newspaper, did analysis. So it was a Somali problem. Okay. Now, the government of Minnesota, as you may know, is very liberal. All right, Tim Walz, former vice presidential candidate under Kamala Harris, is the governor. Okay, there he is. There's Tim. Apparently, Tim says he didn't know anything about this, hard to believe, but that's what he says. Democrats control the Senate in Minnesota. The Attorney General is a Democrat. House in Minnesota is Republican. But nobody knew about this for years and years and years and years. It's unbelievable, disturbing. Why? This is what the Wall Street Journal wrote on December 4th. Quote, Democrats won't acknowledge fraud because they want more Americans on the dole. Welfare is central to their political business model. Republicans who make the scandal about immigration are missing the point and missing an opportunity to educate Americans about the entitlement state grift. Okay. I wrote a column yesterday on BillO'Reilly.com. I got into this a bit. But Minnesota is second in means entitlement spending behind Massachusetts. Ready for the stat? $46,000 per welfare recipient in Minnesota. $46,000. The state funnels into entitlements, not Social Security or Medicare and anything like that, giving people stuff. And they're proud of it. Proud of it. It is the second, I don't know what, the second state that spends that much, Minnesota. It's only 6 million people there. they spend more on means entitlement in California. It's just crazy. It really is crazy. Tim Walz, vice presidential candidate. Okay. Now, the population of, as I said, is approaching 90,000 Somalis. I'm adding legal and illegal in there. And if you criticize the Somali community, who is obviously behind, most of them, this fraud, you get branded a racist. Here is the Minnesota Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. Go.
You know, this vile, racist stream of consciousness from President Old Man Yells at Cloud. You're disgusting. And the people of this country deserve so much better. I just watched the video of Donald Trump attacking the beautiful Somali community that calls Minnesota home. They are part of the fabric of our state.
Yeah, well, I can't argue with problem with part of the fabric of your state, madam, but you don't care about $1 billion grift, apparently. You don't care at all, do you? What have you done about it? Nothing. And this would still be going on if not for two reporters. A guy named Ryan Thorpe, another one, Christopher Russo. They both work for the Manhattan Institute, conservative think tank. They broke the story. Not Minnesota law enforcement, not federal law enforcement. Journalists. And that's the memo. All right, let's get into the point of view. Somebody on the ground in St. Paul, which is the capital of the state. Richard Painter is a law professor at the University of Minnesota. And he's a former chief White House ethics lawyer under Bush the Younger. So, Professor, pleased to have you. In my analysis, am I making any mistakes? Am I being unfair?
Well, let's start with who's responsible for the massive fraud in the state of Minnesota. In addition to the criminals, dozens, and it's going to turn out there are probably well over 100 criminals end up going to jail in connection with this fraud. Now, that out of an 80,000 or so Somali community, that's a small percentage. But who's responsible for what happened here? We have an incompetent governor, Tim Walz, and an incompetent Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. They're responsible. They were overseeing these agencies. They're just handing out money, no questions asked, to criminals. And we've had Tim Walz now for 2 terms, and he wants a 3rd term as governor. Peggy Flanagan wants to be our United States Senator. This is a disaster in Minnesota. You also mentioned Massachusetts, which has a lot of social programs, hands out a lot of money, but we haven't heard about anywhere near as much fraud. Yes, there's fraud in Massachusetts, but the government has been a lot more responsible. Until recently, they had Governor Charlie Baker, who was a good governor. We'll see how things work out under the new governor.
Healy's not at that level.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's stay in Minnesota. You say that the Governor Walz is incompetent. So there are 2 questions then that arise. How is he incompetent? Is he just not smart enough? And why do the people of Minnesota keep electing him?
Well, he's smart enough to do what's politically good for him, to get himself reelected, which is to have friends in the state, in various communities, including the Somali community, who have influence. And unfortunately, there have been organized criminals who have abused, taken advantage of influence in the Somali community.
All right, so you're saying basically he doesn't care about that. He just wants power. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. He wants power,
right,
and he doesn't care.
He doesn't care what happens. All right. I don't know Mr. Walz. I certainly didn't respect his campaign. I thought he looked like a fool out there. But, you know, I've been to Minnesota many times, and folks don't seem, it's not San Francisco, all right? But they elect the people who don't care, and I agree with that assessment. Why?
Well, it seems to be about partisan politics. Who gets elected? I mean, look at our crime rate; it's sky high.
But why do they
And
keep, why do the good people of Minnesota keep electing these people that allow crime, fraud, and everything else? Why do they keep casting the ballots for them?
Well, part of the problem is our Republican Party is not competitive anymore in statewide races. The Republican Party is competitive in several congressional districts. Indeed, 4 of our 8 congressional districts have elected Republicans. But in statewide races, they can't find candidates who will appeal to a broader base. Candidates appear to be too much in line with President Trump or too extreme on some social issues where they don't need to be. We used to have some very strong Republicans, Governor Arnie Carlson, a Republican, Governor Tim Pawlenty. Tim Pawlenty is
Yeah, I
a strong.
remember Plenty. Yeah,
Uh,
well, look, like Oregon and other states, Minneapolis, St. Paul dominates. That's where all the people are. But what strikes me about this is that you have a very fervent liberal climate in Minnesota. And I guess that stems back to the Scandinavians coming there. And I guess, I don't know. But when you see terrible crime, as you've seen in Minnesota, and after the George Floyd stuff, and then you see this massive fraud, and rather than deal with the fraud and say, "Gee, we're sorry," because remember, this tax money is not Minnesota tax money. This is everybody's $1 billion. Everybody. I haven't heard Walz or anybody else say, really sorry about this. I wish it didn't happen. Have you?
well, they say they're sorry. They wish it didn't happen, and they're going to make it better. But
I
I
haven't
don't
heard
think
they're sorry. They said they're sorry. I haven't heard any
well, they're not
apologies.
sorry for their own conduct because they were negligent. They don't want to recognize they were
No.
negligent. The government was in charge, and also have to say President Biden, they were just handing out all this money, no strings attached to the
Ridiculous.
states,
Right.
and the president of the United States was half asleep. So this was something that I don't think should be blamed on the Somali community. It needs to be blamed on the criminals in the Somali community who took advantage of the Somali community, and on the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, the lieutenant governor, Peggy Flanagan, both of them incompetent.
But let
The
me
president,
challenge you there. I haven't heard anybody in the Somali community speak out against this. Have you?
well, say the problem is the political leaders who get elected.
I haven't heard anybody, not one
Ilhan Omar.
person, at
Yeah,
100,000 say, "I'm ashamed." And we Somalis aren't like that. I haven't heard anybody do that. And Omar,
I've
your
heard some-
congressperson, is
I've heard some people-
outrageous.
Yeah,
It's
some
outrageous.
people, I don't think she speaks for the Somali community. She is an incompetent congressperson. She's also anti-Semitic, and we've all known that. That's been a serious problem with Ilhan Omar. That she should never have been nominated for that seat. Once again, the Republicans are not competitive in that race at all. The
Yeah, because
Democratic
it's a
Party-
Somali-dominated district. So
well, it's a lot of, but others as well. White liberals.
yeah, but
Far left white liberals, and I deal with them all the time at the University of Minnesota. The biggest anti-Semites we have at the University of Minnesota are not Somali at all. They're white leftists.
all right,
Uh,
interesting.
People running Minneapolis politics for a long time, and then you get the Somali community is being taken advantage of. We've been through this before in this country. We can either fight the mafia, or we can blame it on all the Italians. The real answer is to fight the mafia. And to
Yeah,
get the politics
I
out of
understand.
office who are
Look,
bought by
I
the
get
mafia.
it. I'm not. I'm a reporter here on President Trump. I understand that all Somalis aren't bad, but I disagree with you a bit. I don't think there's any activism in that community, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that are standing up and saying we need to clean it up. I haven't heard it. I haven't seen it. Somali crime is higher than the other groups, as you know. And until I see it, I'm not going to attack President Trump for his categorization that we were very generous in accepting these people from one of the most horrendous countries on earth. And they came here, and they're not doing what they should do. Anyway, Professor, I want you to have a very Merry Christmas. Say hello to everybody at the university, and it's a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.